Hello, everybody. My name is Desiree, aka Virtuous Desi. I have a special guest today, and it is Samuel Hahn. You want to say the full? Do I say your full name or what?
I wouldn't right now just because I'm very that's one of those things I'm very I'm not against being completely transparent, but there's creeps on the internet
Right.
and a little ambiguity. Even if only one person in the world ever sees this, I don't want that one person to be like, I'm their biggest fan and start trying to find me on Facebook and all that crap. So
Well, today I can be, you know, Virtuous Desi, but Desiree, but Virtuous Desi on pretty much all social media handles.
mhm.
So as you can see from the title, this is a conversation about a lot of things, pretty much centering around dating, modern dating, uh, and random topics that we talked about in our video. So yeah. I really think that I would love your take um, from a guy's perspective
Mm,
in modern dating, because I know that we've talked about that a lot, but just your experiences, maybe modern dating. You want to start there?
sure.
Oh, the
It's
woes of modern.
it's awful. I don't like modern dating at all.
Yeah.
Um, in a lot of ways, and it might be from my classical literature upbringing, where
Yes.
the first, well, other than
Tell them
stuff
about
made in the 40s and 50s, classic black and white, noir crime movies, and all that stuff, pre and slightly post World War II type stuff. That's what I was first exposed to because my parents are baby boomers and both born in the 50s. And but even more so, my mom homeschooled me and gave me more or less a classical, more old fashioned education. Like the curriculum she taught was basically what she learned in school, at least a fraction of what she learned. Because I think she told me she had to learn Latin in either high school or college, or that was almost like a prerequisite. Like you had to learn some broken crap. It might have been college because I know she was a part of a sorority, I think, at one point. But anyway,
would have been,
I
yeah.
think I think that my view on dating in general is more or less old fashioned to the point where I think that it should be dating should only be done for the purpose of finding your marital spouse, that it's for marriage. It's not for having fun. It's not for fooling around. It's not for promiscuous intercourse. It's just at the end of the day, it's kind of like intercourse is for making babies. It's not just
Right?
to it's like if I were to market alcohol, I would say this product is to kill brain cells and
Mhm.
to kill your liver. And people are like, that's an awful way to advertise a product. I'm like, but that's what it does. I could tell you it makes you feel good and all this other stuff, but what it does is it poisons your body. But the same thing for sex. The purpose of it is for reproduction. It is pleasurable. That's a great side effect. I'm glad it's not painful, because that would make pursuing of the species kind of hard, and we'd all probably die out because we're like, life isn't worth living or continuing. Um,
Painful
but
for me first, probably for a reason.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that because it's purpose driven towards marriage, dating, that is, that
Yeah.
I think that you should involve your family. You should, if you have one. I mean, I know someone will be like, I didn't grow up with mom and dad. And I'm like, well, your closest friends and family, then, people you care about and know that are looking out for your best interests. I think that you should involve them. You should ask them, because I know I've told my mother many times, I'm going to vet this person because I'm going to be head over here as puppy dog in love. And I want you to shake me if you have to and be like, I don't know what kind of evil witch spell this woman has over you, but like you need to snap out of it. She's crazy. And I told my mom that like years and years and years ago. Um, but at the same time, like when I told her about you, I told her that you know, I wouldn't just up and propose to anybody for any reason,
Right.
especially over time. Like it got more and more to the part where like I wouldn't even talk about marriage on dates. I wouldn't even talk about children. I would just try to get to know the person, like the individual. And then if I thought that they might like be cohabitable, like I could live in the same house with this person, then I would be like, okay, do you want to have kids?
Yeah.
Then I would look into like, should I look at you as a possible um mate or person I could pursue in marriage? And
And I think
yeah,
how a lot of people do it.
yeah.
Actually, it's more of a let me just get to know you.
Hmm.
And then I'll see if I want something serious with you. But for those of you who don't know already, I'm a psychotherapist. I talk to a lot of people about relationships. So one of the things that I hear a lot is people do that to self-protect, like they've been wounded or jaded. And so now, oh, I'm just going to date because there's a cycle of loneliness, right? You can get out fresh out of a heartbreak and you're like, I'm done with men, or done with women. You know, you're okay by yourself. But eventually you're going to go around that loop into, well, I need some companionship. I'm lonely. I still want something special with somebody special, you know. So you start to date. You might still have your shield up though, you know. Why are we doing this? Like, what is this? Wakanda? But just or Wonder Woman, like what the heck? Marvel, stop it. But anyway,
Oh yeah, Wonder Woman does do. I never thought of that. Wonder Woman did that, and so did. Oh, that's crazy.
my brother says that that's like an occult sign or something, but I don't know.
Probably. It's like people saying like I forget which one it is, but they're like it's a I think it's I can remember, but it was like white power, and I was like,
Oh, really? Oh,
I'm
dang.
like, what? And they're like, yeah, and why? And milk is a white supremacist item, and I'm like, cow's milk or just milk, the white stuff.
Well, we
You're
just
taking Caucasian skin tone and the color white, and you're putting them together. That's insane, but okay.
wow. Yeah, well, yeah, I meant shield. Let's do it like this. You have
Yeah, yeah.
shield.
Well, no, I mean, like this is like guarding yourself in general,
Yeah,
like putting up an
that's what
arm.
I mean. People who are wounded, jaded, they're you still have a shield up, right?
Mhm.
While you're trying to get to know someone, but I'm not going to do anything serious. But what we don't realize is that modern dating sucks because we're perpetuating this cycle of,
Mhm.
well, I'm going to get to know this person. You can't control what they're thinking. You get their hopes up maybe, and then you drop them because you knew from the beginning you're not emotionally available.
Yeah.
We do this. And so I know people say, oh, well, I don't think it should be that serious. I don't think you should date just for marriage. But what they don't realize is that's why modern dating sucks because it's so elusive. There's so much ambiguity around what are we doing here? You know, the
Mhm.
roles, gender roles, which we could totally get into that. It's all ambiguity. It's all woo, you know, so it just causes so much pain. But yeah, that's my thought on whatever you just said. But go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, like on that note, like, do you think, because you're talking about people being guarded after, like, having that attitude of going through a breakup or just getting frustrated with dating and distancing themselves socially from people and like being resistant to be open, and they build a wall or a shield, and they're like, no, they're very, like I said, resistant to, um, people to date. What do you to contrast that? What do you think about people who um immediately go like it's like they crawl out of a pool and then they jump back into the dating pool. They're like, well, I just need to like swim out further and go deeper. And it's like, I don't know if that's the answer either. Cause like that's what one of my brothers used to do is he would like go through a relationship and I'm like, okay, that's like
Yeah.
we've before I could really feel sorry for him, he'd have like a new girlfriend and I'm like,
Yes.
dang, you move fast, dude. And now I just say like he just doesn't want to be alone, which I don't blame him. But
Right.
like it's so fast that like I can't rationalize why someone would want to go through that. And I don't know if that's healthy to be bouncing back and rebounding that quick, like within a week, like you're dating a new person. Like you
Well,
find somebody and you're like, oh, you're my next person.
yeah, I would say there's a lot of reasons why I would suspect that not to be healthy. For every individual, there's always nuances and caveats, right?
Mm,
But for your average person, I think it's unhealthy because one, if you cannot be alone for an extended amount of time, generally that means you're running from something within yourself, that you are alone, you are not sufficient.
mm,
Um, that's and this brings me to something that people always say to Christian singles, like, God is enough, Jesus is enough, right? Which is very true. At the end of the day, Jesus is at the core of my peace, right?
mm,
Um, I'm very thankful for where I'm at and with you, but it's still, I have this core of God, right? That's great. But I don't think that we can just say that people should be able to be without a person. Most people are not designed to be solitude or be in solitude.
mm,
Most of us are designed for companionship. But I will say, for what you're talking about, if a person's going from relationship, and they cannot be by themselves, they're missing some sort of healing within themselves, some sort of spirituality that they might need, a deeper meaning. There could be a lot of things that a person's running from. Because if you're looking for someone of value, someone with
mm.
standards in this modern day, it takes a minute. Now, you can't just go, I mean, you can't date to somebody every 2 weeks and it be a quality person. That's where I'm kind of suspicious of that sort of behavior.
Well, and I don't think like I've said for years now that you do need to give people a chance. Like if somebody approaches you, you don't just need to be rude and be like, no. Like you don't just need to be like, why are you approaching me? Get away from me,
Yeah.
you stinky person.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like when I say like give everybody a chance, if you're looking, and by looking, I mean if you're wanting a partner, if you're wanting somebody in your life to spend time with, to whatever, and you're not doing your fair share of the work of going out and trying to find someone, like I tend to think that what guys should do is they should have as many hobbies as they can. Don't just sit around and play video games. Like go to the gun range, go to the gym. um, Maybe you are artistic and you never not autistic, artistic, and you need to take painting classes or something like that. And or maybe it's mechanicking, like turning wrenches and fixing things, carpentry. I'm throwing out a lot of skills here because typically I think that's what men are good at. Men are best working with objects, not with people. I will die on that hill in that argument, but um, that's why that and that is why I think that men typically are perceived to not show their emotions or be emotional, is
Yeah.
because I try to tell people that like men are typically better at just working with objects and not people. So there's a reason why if you look at a man and you're like, I got this thing for you to do, and he's like, okay, and he just goes and does it. But then if you look at him, it's like, okay, dig deep down and tell me about how eating my sandwich I prepared for you made you feel. And he's like, what? Like I could tell you that it tasted good, but like, yeah, but how does that make you feel? And he's like, I love you. Like it's kind of that's not how men think. Men don't immediately go to like, let me think about how my emotions play into this. Typically, um, and I think that's where a lot of women go wrong is they ask these like really deep emotional questions that they think are simple, and I'm like, well, to each their own. And it might be very easy for you, but for guys, I don't think it is. And I forgot where I was going with this, but as you know, that's what I tend to do is I just like get off course. Um, but yeah, I think that men in general in the dating sphere, they
Yeah.
need to look at who they're the qualities that they're looking for, like getting back to the hobbies thing, like if you really value like home safety and maybe homesteading is a thing, like you want to live on a farm and you want to live off the grid for the most part, and be very self-sustaining, you should probably start looking for qualities in a partner who likes to hunt or wouldn't mind cutting up a chicken that had just been slaughtered and cooking it, or fishing, or manual labor outside, and like doesn't mind like losing power and living by candlelight or fireplace if need be. Like you need to look for those kind of things to begin with, rather than just um looking for like, well, we really enjoy the stuff we do in the bedroom. We're really sexually compatible. And I'm like, what else is there? And they're like, I don't know. And most of my friends, my male friends that like I talk to, when they do get divorced or break up, I ask them that just out of curiosity for my own like data that I'm like compiling. I ask them like, what was it about that person that looking back on it, you thought at the time made you compatible? And they look back and they realize how little they actually knew about the person that they married or that they were dating. And they hadn't thought to ask those in the house live-in questions. Like it could be something as simple as like, do you loathe taking out the garbage, or do you hate doing the dishes? um because if you also don't like doing the dishes, that might be a problem, because you both don't like to do something. And if you never discuss that, or if it never comes up, and you always do that dating thing where you go on a date, like a scheduled event,
Mhm.
and you put on your best face, your best performance to impress that person. If you only do that and you don't actually like just have a normal day where you're just both around each other, you're both going to have this fantasy of each other that this person's perfect. They never do anything wrong. They're always polite and always this, always that. They're never in a bad mood. And then, and from my experience, they see the one time that you are irritated, you did have a bad day, something wasn't going right, and they think that you've been lying to them the whole time.
Yes.
And that is the first trigger. If I have any triggers, that's the first thing to trigger me. Is I'm better now, but I used to go off on people where I'm like, they're like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I'm having a bad day. I'm usually composed and
Right.
well kept together, but as of right now, I'm not feeling it, and you just need to leave me alone, let me calm down. And they tend to take that like a wound of sorts, like I broke their trust or something, and I have to try to explain to them, no, 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 this is just a side of me that you've never seen.
Right. And that,
And I think when people get married, that's what happens, is they see these new behaviors that they've never encountered, that have always been there, and they're like, oh, this is just terrible. And I'm like, it's not terrible. You're just learning more about that person, and you should grow to love who they are because of those, in spite of those things. But
yes, I think this brings me to something else that I'd be curious of your thoughts on
mm,
people falling in love with the idea of somebody and not really that person in their humanity and in their flaws. Like there's this illusion that people really fall in love with and not, because this goes into like, what is covenant, right?
mm,
What does that actually mean?
mm,
Because nobody's perfect. Obviously, you don't want to marry a psychopath or sociopath. But marriage is a risk.
mm,
Okay. That's why
mm.
God, that's why God, I think, has this idea of covenant because you see it through and you do what you agree to do. Uh,
Yeah,
but I'm just curious, in your experiences with anybody, friends, family, just as far as this falling in love with the idea of a person, but when that person's flaws start to show, oh, I don't love them anymore, type of thing.
that's that's all I've really experienced personally, and I've seen it happen in more people than not. Is they have this idea in their head that is brought on from the way they were raised, by what their parents told them to look for, by what their friends told them to look for. But it's mostly as you get older, I think it's more your culture and society is really what is playing a larger role over time, because
Yeah.
at first it's just your family. It's like just your parents that are influencing you. But
Right.
as you go to school, now it's your school and your life at home. And then when you branch away from your family influence is still there, but it's getting smaller compared to like all these other people you're meeting. And then at some point, I think we tend to, once we're kind of set in our ways to a degree, we um our behavior's kind of set. But then society does play a big role in that, where like now you're seeing movies all the time. Now you're seeing stuff on television. You're seeing stuff in the news. You're seeing like all these couples at work or at church or wherever you're frequenting, at restaurants. And you're observing like more and more people every day. And because of the internet and social media, it's
Yeah.
like multiplied by like at least 10 times, if not like 100.
Yeah.
So you're getting this illusion, this fantasy, this, or I would call it a fallacy more than anything, because it's false. It's not just fantasy, it's a fallacy, that you picture what you think
Hmm.
you should have, and what's good for you based on what you like and what you know about yourself. But the shocker to most people is like, no one knows you better than yourself typically, but there are things about yourself that you can only know through like criticism and people telling you. Like I have little quirks. I have little ticks and stuff that I've done to people that they pointed out to me, and I go, I don't do that. And then I think about it and I go, dang, I do like tap them, like literally tap on somebody, go, hey, I need this. And someone like laughed one time and pointed that out to me. They're like, or like the fact I do this from time to time. I used to do this all the time because I picked it up from a friend. And they're
Yeah.
like, you do that a lot, and he picked that up from you. And I thought about it. I'm like, no, I probably picked it up from him. Um,
Hmm.
so like, and I was a full grown adult at that time, and I didn't think I was going to pick up
Right.
mannerisms or anything from other
Yeah.
people. But yeah, I think that the fantasy slash fallacy of falling in love mostly comes from, and it's the problem that we're seeing in our culture, is we're getting it from movies, we're getting it from books, we're getting it from even music, that people are saying like, this is what it is. And I think if you turn back the clock a little bit and you look back to like our parents' generation and further back, there was less of this culture of people being brought up in, you can have what you want. Like no matter what you can imagine, no matter what you can fantasize, like you can have it.
Yeah.
And I think there was more realistic expectations back in the day, where people would say, this is what a husband and a wife is. And I don't care if you like it or not. That is what it is. Like, if you want to be a husband, this is what you got to do. If you want to be a mother and a wife, this is what you have to be. This is what you have to do. And now there's all this confusion about like, you can be a single parent. You can be a single parent slash entrepreneur. You can never have children. You can never get married. You can be a shut in. You can do all these things. And I think that there is a balancing act at the end of the day you have to look at.
Yeah.
And it's just really strange to me that people aren't willing to admit that, because we're seeing more and more that there is pushback from people who are eventually realize, after they fail a lot in relationships, they realize, okay, me going and whoring myself around and like sleeping with people indiscriminately, all in the vein of screaming to the rooftops that like I'm just having fun. Like that's everyone's thing, is like, I'm just trying to have a good time and I'm just trying to whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but anytime you do anything that involves another person, your actions are gonna affect that person, whether you are truly having fun or not. You
Right.
know, you could look at it as like, we're gonna go shoot guns. Well, what if somebody accidentally like gets shot? You were
Hmm.
just trying to have fun. You were doing it as safe as you could, but that you were doing something dangerous, and that is a possible outcome. Same thing with relationships. You
Yeah.
could think, oh, we're just having fun, we're just doing whatever, but then one person gets way more serious and falls in love quicker. I would say gets infatuated, because that's the
Well,
first thing that happens, is you get infatuated and you don't actually um, care about the person. You care more about like their little nuanced things that you think are um, what are perfect about them. But
mm,
yeah, I think that at the end of the day, it's our society and culture that's perpetuating this idea that like you can have the Disney fairy tale romance. And now Disney, as a matter of fact, is even saying like, you don't need a Prince Charming, you don't need a princess, which I think is even worse than the idea that, because they're trying to get away from the hero archetype that Carl Jung and dang it, I can't think of his name. Hero with a Thousand Faces. I can't think of the author of that book, but these I was going to say scientists, these researchers that looked into mythology and archetype all across the world, and they found, hey, every culture in the world has a hero archetype, and everybody has this. So like that alone, you can't really argue. You have to say like, no, there is a pattern there. It does exist. But nowadays, again, getting back to people being told you can be and do whatever you want,
Mhm.
which is a lie. You
Right.
can't be what you want, because at the end of the day, if you study sociology, you will conform to a group. No matter what, you are going to conform to a group, or you're going to die. Because if you study like wolf packs, people, we like to romanticize a lone wolf, and actually a lone wolf is the most susceptible to dying, because he's alone and he doesn't have anyone to help him, he doesn't have anyone to help protect him, and he'll get picked off. And the same thing happens in the real world. The less friends you have, the less you go out. It's not good for you mentally. It's not good for you physically. And everybody, getting back to it, everybody is living in this fairyland, that you can have what you want, and no one has to conform to you. No one has to, or everyone has to conform to you. You don't have to conform to anyone. You can have whatever you want, period. And I think people get frustrated when they get a dose of reality that the world doesn't work that way. You have to go out into the world and learn how to live in the world. You have to learn how to just deal with every factor of living that you don't control, which is most of them. You don't control hardly anything in your life. You control how you react to life, and that's it. You don't
Yeah.
control how life hits you. You have to just all you're in control of is like, someone's yelling at me. How do I control myself? How do I react to that? You wake up and it's raining, and you wanted it not to be raining. Well, how do I react to that? So your spouse is in a bad mood, and you're really in a good mood, but now that's changing your mood. So like, how do you regulate that? And all of that is um all you can control. But yeah, anyway, I think that modern dating and the fantasy and fallacy of falling in love and being in love, I think it all has to do with what other people are saying to us. And
Yeah.
the worst people, by the way, who do that, who feed you bad information and bad influence, are friends
Yeah.
who enable you into being conceited, into being an egotistical idiot, and thinking that like, yeah, you are the center of the universe and you don't need to change or grow at all. And for instance, I've seen a lot of women do it. I've seen men do it, but I typically see it firsthand with women who will be like, no, John Mark is a butthole and he just doesn't deserve you because you're wonderful and perfect. And I'm like,
You're a queen, honey.
yeah, yes, that boss babe, you're a queen. And I actually, over the years in social media, people will be like, yes, king. Anyone will call me a king. And I immediately, like instinctually, I'm like, I'm not a king. I'm a peasant, if anything. Like I'm nobody special. I'm never gonna be anything special. And everybody still doesn't understand that what I mean by that is I am a humble man who understands his place in the universe. I have as much inherent value as anyone else who's my build, my age, with what I know. If you cloned me, and I would be no different than the other one with the same thoughts and actions and abilities. So I just look at myself that way, and I think you do need to elevate yourself at times and think like, I am better than some of the riffraff, but at the end of the day, you have to have that ego check and know that you're not all that great. And at any moment, you could lose everything. All your money could go away. You could get in an accident, become paralyzed. Like, so many things could happen. You could go blind, deaf. Who knows? Like, anything could happen to you in a moment's notice, and that just brings you down. But
Mhm.
if you understand like your core value, if
Yes.
you want to get the spiritual side of things, that you are loved and cared for by Jesus, like, then that can anchor you in a way that keeps
Oh, yeah.
everybody on the same parallel, horizontal plane of existence, where we all know that you might excel over here, you might not over here, but at the same day, where we are all the same is we're all loved equally by God. And that's the most important thing. And if we all kind of have a baseline of that, I think that's where, like, for you and I, um, it helps with just that being the foundation, and everything on top of that, we can always go back to the foundation and say, why are we together? Why are we, going to make this covenant together and so on. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I do think a lot of that comes from a false sense of
Being.
well, yeah, well, pride and because see, a lot of people they don't have that relationship with Jesus like you were talking about. I do think that's key, that's foundational. Especially if you were not blessed to have a good relationship with your mother or father. Like a lot
Mhm.
of girls have daddy wounds, right? And I think I'm very thankful that I did know what it's like to have a father that cares, that would die for me. I
Mhm.
saw how he treated me, differently from my brother, not in a way that I was special. Now, my brother might think so, but in a way that, I'm a girl, and so I'm different from a boy.
Mhm.
And I have certain protections, stuff like that. So I do think that also helped me to have a more authentic sense of value as opposed to, let's say, an artificial sense of
Mhm.
value. That's where I think all that I'm a queen and know your worth, girl, and add tax and all this type of stuff. They say that, which the premise of that, I get it. It's not that because there's a lot of women who don't know their worth. And so they put up with the
Yeah.
riffraff that you were referring to earlier. But I
Mhm.
do think that you need to have a genuine sense of worth and value where you're not prideful and thinking too highly of yourself.
Or you think your worth is certain qualities that turns out they're not actually that valuable to most
Oh,
people. Like
Lord. Yeah.
physical appearance versus say like
Yeah.
skill at anything. I don't care if it's scrubbing a toilet or like cooking a sandwich or like making a sandwich to use that stereotype. But like no matter what it is, like who at the end of the day after day, like what are you going to really value? Are you going to value someone who knows how to be a homemaker or someone who just knows how to look pretty first thing in the morning and then they don't do anything for the rest of the day?
Yeah.
Like I've literally known marriages where like I asked them, what does your wife do at home? These are military marriages, by the way. And they're like, they just stay at home. And I'm like, do they cook for you? And they're like, no. Do they clean the house? No, I have to clean. The man still comes home after working like at least 8 hours of being a soldier, and their wife didn't do anything while they were gone, and doesn't do anything when they're home, other than complain and ask like why he can't make more money. And if I hadn't experienced that firsthand, I wouldn't be able to truly like picture that and be like, okay, yeah, I can see how a woman could be that way. I can't imagine how anyone could be that way, man or woman. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that that's one of those other things is that women who have that boss whatever mentality that like they're valuing the wrong things.
Yeah. Yeah. Men and women. And with women, I don't know where that comes from, but they do think that, certain attributes, you know, is more important than intelligence, being a
Mhm.
good mother, being a good wife, um, knowing how to keep a home, or cook and all those things. Even if it's basic, we're not talking about being a chef. We're talking about just
I,
knowing how to keep a home.
I also think that like a lot of women who don't like the idea of submitting to a man or however you want to say that is
That.
they don't. So a lot of women who have this like resistance, right? They don't want to be subservient or whatever. They don't want to be a slave. I've heard some women refer to it that way.
Yeah.
I don't think they've ever had a man fight for them. Like I don't think they've ever had someone value them and say, "No, you're not just any woman. You're my woman, and you're
Mhm.
the only one for me." I think if more women experience that genuinely, it would change their attitude of loyalty. It would change their attitude of like who brings what to the relationship.
Yeah.
And I mean, I call it compromise at the end of the day, but if I ask you to do one thing and you're like, okay, and then you ask me to do something that's completely different and I go, oh, okay. And I ask this of you and you ask this of me, and every once in a while they crisscross and it's just this balancing act of like, like you love to cook. I like to cook. You love to cook and like you'll cook anything. And I'm like, that's awesome because there's days where I don't want to do anything. I don't want to cook. I don't want to, I just want to, everyone has those days, but like there's certain things that like if you told me, you know, you never have to cook again. And I'll just cook forever until I can't use my hands anymore. I'll be like, okay. And then like, I'll look at you and say, you don't ever have to drive anywhere. I'll be your personal chauffeur and like open the door for you and all that. Yeah. So, I mean, like there's
To
things like
me,
that.
yeah.
And, and I would say that as long as I'm around, like you shouldn't ever have to worry about, I mean, you should worry about being in danger, but you should never have to worry about being alone and not having someone to step in front of you or protect you or anything because um again that goes back to like valuing like the roles and like what the other person has to offer. Because I think if women, because I've actually heard testimonies from women who just get physically assaulted sexually or just
Mm,
beat up, and they have a humbling moment where they go, I never thought that a man was that strong. Like I was that weak. And
mm,
that's why I want to look at a lot of women and go like, if you understood like where you are in the grand scheme of things, like just physically, the physical prowess of a man and how easily to angered they are, and how that anger can turn into adrenaline and strength.
yeah.
It's just it's crazy to me that like women wouldn't respect a man who would be willing to protect them because he loves her. Like that to me is so underrated in general. It sounds very romantic, but it's just so underrated now that like and men not wanting to be that for a woman, like be a warrior or a soldier or whatever you want to call a hunter, like hunter gatherer, like whatever. Like you don't see people wanting to be that anymore. They just want to be like a businessman or just two people that live together. And there's not these clearly defined roles anymore, roles for men and women.
Yeah, in relationships, and I know we talked about before how it's kind of good that we're dealing with this social experiment that's going on right now, where everybody's trying to
Mm-hmm.
redefine this and say, "Oh, we don't need this," and this is a social construct. That is the
That's
buzz.
everywhere and everything. It
Yeah,
was just gender at one point, but now it's like
everything.
the role of a woman being a woman. And I'm like,
Yeah, and but the good thing that's coming from that is that I think that it makes these things that you and I are talking about, which um drew us together. If y'all hadn't figured out yet, we're together.
yeah, we're engaged. So yeah.
But yeah, I think one of the things that would happen for us was that I want to know your opinion on that, on like how we maintained these ideals and our faith in these principles, despite the foolishness we have experienced. I think that that's what drew us together because I finally had met someone that um, understood, not just talked about, but understood like why these things are important, why these ideals that we're talking about, although it doesn't always work in a vacuum, it takes some effort, it takes some mistakes and all of that. We're certainly not saying it's not without its fallacies, but it's the ideals that we're talking about work for a reason. Traditional
Mm.
values, traditional gender roles, and men and women kind of being that yin and yang. However, that might look for your personal relationship, that's you. But for you and I think we fall pretty much along those lines of what's considered traditional, just because I've been cooking since I was like 13. I had to, I got my mom. I was so excited. I've been watching Food Network forever. My mom finally let me like cook meals for my family when I was like 13, 14 and stuff. And I loved it. I've loved it ever since. You know, and it's not like I don't like going out or don't like, I'm a foodie in general, but that's just something that I love to do. I love to clean, my house. I love a clean house. These are just things. This is who I am, so it kind of works out for us in that way. But um, I think for me, it just was believing that this was the best way. And it was great, in 2020 when all of these coaches and influencers finally woke up to the fact that there is a such thing as evil in the world. Um,
Mm.
and that you can't just talk about spirituality in these abstract terms, that there is an actual evil in the world and that there is something that's better. There's
Mm.
good and then there's better. And so a lot of people started turning towards traditional values. The discussion around gender roles came up, and there's a lot of, debate about that out there. I was happy to see that, but for someone like me, this has been
Mhm.
who I am since, I really read the Bible when I was 13, 14. And I mean, read it all the way through, by the way.
Yeah.
I was a total Bible nerd, which that's something you and I had in common as well. But yeah, I just decided that God's way was the better way. And despite my, I guess what I had been through, where it's like, is there any guy out there that's gonna really fall along these lines? Even, guys will say, oh, we want a woman that will stay home. We want a woman that will do this. But when you actually talk to a guy about that, they're like, oh, well, I don't know about that, and they
Mhm.
probably made more money than you. And they were like, oh,
Mhm.
I don't know about you staying home. I mean, that's expensive
Mhm.
and stay
Mhm.
here.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, so guys want that, but do they really want that?
Mhm.
I have found that they did not most of
Yeah.
the time. They didn't have the courage to actually go through with those things. So I'm just wondering yeah, talk, but what kept you on the path as a guy? I think women would love to hear from a guy's perspective. What kept you not doing what your friends do, which is using women, getting on Tinder and swiping? Like, what stopped you from doing that?
I
Uh,
would love to sound like the alphabet soup community and say I was born that way, like I'm and by the way, just disclaimer, I have a lot of trans and gay friends. I don't outrightly condemn them or anything. We all see eye to eye that we all think different things, believe different things,
yeah,
and live and let live. If you're living a peaceful coexistence with other people, more power to you. Just don't be violent and don't be hateful, and we can all get along. But anyway, I think I was born that way.
yeah.
I always felt different growing up. I always felt like I didn't belong in most groups.
Mhm.
In a lot of ways, even in my own family, I felt like an outsider, like I didn't belong, which is ironic because my mother, coming from in the South, at least, a very different kind of family.
Yeah.
Um, my dad was Lutheran, she was Baptist, and that like does not jive with Lutherans at all. It's like being Catholic. They're like, if you're not Catholic, yeah, it's not going to work.
Mhm.
Um, but my mom always felt like an outsider. So years later, we would kind of like, um, I would find that like I have a lot in common with my mom, like personality trait wise. But I think what kept me from, like you said, doing because I tried to be like other people. I think that's one thing that makes me a little different was I tried to not be a player, I guess is the term. Because I've never been any of those things at heart. So like it's hard for me to like actually know like what the right terminology is. But I've never been a player or a guy who just I've never been a hookup guy, a fuck boy, which is
Yes,
the
that's the
dumbest
term.
term ever.
Yeah.
Um, because one, just call them a boy. That's insulting to a man because it's like you're a child. You act like a child, you think like a child, and you just complain all the time like a child. Um, so I think what kept me, like you said, kept me from doing those things is I tried once or twice to do some things, and not only did I feel awful, like shame after I did them, but now I've done other things that like were bad that I don't feel shameful for, but there's a lot of things I've done that I felt shame and like that this isn't me. Like I knew immediately like this was a mistake. I shouldn't have done this. Why am I and it was a question of I would ask myself internally, why am I trying to be this way? Why am I doing this? And I would just as fast answer, well, I just want to be like everybody else. I want to be happy. I want to be enjoying the pleasures of the flesh or whatever you want to call it. Like I want to be
Yeah.
having fun because
Real.
that's the goal is just to be happy and have fun and seek pleasure, avoid pain. And eventually I got better at being comfortable with the idea of being alone, which I hate. As I became a teenager, transitioning from a introverted child into a sexually active teenager, as much as I am still very prone to wanting to limit my circle of people that I'm just around, um, I still don't like being alone. I crave companionship and family and all those things I think everyone does at the end of the day, whether they want to admit it or not. Everyone wants to be a part of a family unit. Um, I think that's why you have so many like cat and dog moms and stuff where they're like, "This is my baby," and I'm like, "That baby only took like 3 months to become a fully mature animal,
I don't,
as
yeah,
opposed to like 3 or 4 years for that thing to start walking and talking on its own." Um,
yeah,
and you still have to like discipline them until they're like, I don't know,
forever
out of
because
the house. Like it never stops.
yeah,
Um, but but yeah, I think a lot of it though is rooted in what I genuinely deeply want, which is I want a family. I
mhm.
want I've always wanted to live like a Christ-like life, even though I've not been that great at it. I have just as many failings as other people, but I think a big thing is I think that at the end of the day, it's more or less like I take responsibility for like knowing what I want. Okay, this must be important.
Yay!
And we're back being
Yeah,
called into work, but it's fine. I'm back. So
yeah. Well, we got a few minutes left anyway, so we can you want to wrap it up and there's so much we could talk about. I'm sure
I
people
know. Yeah, yeah,
about how we met, how we did a courtship. We didn't do a boyfriend.
yeah. It was yeah. I was it. I wouldn't really say we dated. I mean, the dating, if anything, was like on Hinge, the dating app that we met on, like that. It's the closest thing to dating I would say that we did. Or we went on a date and then we started courting right after that. Um,
Pretty much.
but yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that just looked like he still took me out, took me to a biblical history museum, took me out to dinner a couple of times. But a lot of it was conversation, I think, in the phone calls in between, um, you know, it
yeah.
was very intentional. I will say that. So there are good guys out there, ladies. It's just a matter of holding to your principles, you know.
Well, I think it was one of those things where like I was confident enough to like just be very straightforward,
You
but also I I kind of didn't care if like you like I wasn't trying to impress you to the point where I'm like, what do I have to say to get her to like be into me? I'm just like, no, I'm just gonna if this doesn't work, and be like, nice to meet you, and then I'm gonna leave. Like we'll never see or talk again. Um, like I don't care kind of thing where it's because I think that goes kind of circles back around to the fantasy thing where like I was just getting to know you and I was taking for who you were. I wasn't trying to build up this idea in my head of like, this woman's perfect. This is the woman I'm going to have all my babies with and I'm going to settle down with. Like, I
yeah,
used to think that way, but after meeting so many different people, I'm just like, no, I'm just going to hang
yeah.
out and get to know you. And when you ask me a question, I'll give you an honest answer.
Yes, yes. I felt the same way. I felt like I had finally got to that place for a couple of years before I met you, but especially in 2022, 2023, I think I got to that same place where it was like, I'm trying to get rid of guys, as in during the vetting process, which I'm surprised that some people don't know what vetting is, but that's where you're basically trying to figure out if this person is right for you and you're asking them questions to figure that information out. It is certainly not going with the flow. Vetting is very intentional.
It's what businesses are supposed to do, but
Oh yeah.
businesses don't do that.
Oh
Very,
yeah. But yeah, I felt like I just got to that place where I can approach, it was with kindness. I didn't have any grudges or I wasn't jaded. It's just that I was protecting my heart. I wasn't presumptuous. I knew anything was possible. I knew what I was looking for. Um, and the sooner you get rid of people that are not that, the sooner you find your person. That was kind of my mentality.
that actually makes me think of something. I know that like there's this stereotype of women not speaking, like not saying what they mean. In other words, like an example would be like saying like we're out of toilet paper, and not saying, hey, we're out of toilet paper, go buy toilet paper. They're just like making a statement. That's what a man hears is like, oh, okay, we're out of toilet paper, big deal. And I'll use a mag. The guy's like, I'll just use a magazine or something. Like he's like, whatever. But to a woman, it's implied but not spoken. And what I think is funny is you could flip that around on women and just say, well, men do that too, but y'all don't like it when men do it. If you're like, how was your day? And he's like, it was fine. Like, clearly, if you say it that way, like, it's not fine. But then women are like, do you want to talk about it? And he's like, no. And what's funny is like, there's just this, like, it's obvious that, like, just leave it alone or just whatever. But, um, there's a similarity, I think, in like the behavior of men and women. It's just knowing, it's like language in general. Like it's all making sounds. It's just knowing this sound means this thing and this one means this. And like you just, as soon as you can understand, like, okay, this, I understand this language.
Mhm.
This over here means what I know. And after that, it all makes sense. But yeah, I think men and women, there's this lack of like understanding or want to understand the other sex. And because I remember I'd bring stuff up like that to my mother, and she'd be like, my mother would basically tell me, she's like, well, I grew up learning that men are men, and that's it. Like, you just, like, that's a man. And you just kind of leave it at that. Like, if you were to complain or do anything, it's just like, why are they like that? It's like, because that's just what a woman does. And I would even say that, like, that's what a man does. That's what a woman does.
Yeah.
That's what a child does. You just, and I don't overthink it. I don't try to like beat my head over and be like, why can't they see it the way I see it? I'm like, they can't.
Yeah.
They're an individual and they're completely different from me, which is fine. If we can't see eye to eye, that's,
Yeah.
then compromise comes back into play.
Yeah.
But
Men and women are just different. I remember my mom making that, saying that a lot. You can't compare men with women, or you can't compare boys with girls. She used to say that all the time. So
mm-mm.
implied that, they're inherently different in certain ways, which is
Yeah,
true, you know. Um, well, I'm sure we could talk forever. We do.
yeah, we do talk a
Yeah, because
lot
we talk like this, like
all the time.
all the time. But yeah, um, I think in closing, we plan to do this as a YouTube slash podcast slash, it will grow as we grow, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But um, leave your questions below for us. I know we kind of re-rambled, but that's just how it's going to be, unless we have like specific things that we want to tackle.
Mhm.
This was just the first. Let's just get it done, because we've been talking about doing this for a while. So great job, honey. You're gonna help me edit this, I'm sure.
Probably.
But yeah, whenever this comes out, y'all be blessed. I love you, all of Sam's followers and friends. I love y'all too, you
Mhm.
know. Until next time. It's supposed to be a wave, but it turned out to be, I mean,
Wait,
like a right the roof type of what is that? This
I'm just trying to be a man over here with my arms crossed, just like.